Hello everyone, my name is Victor. I am the Occult Technician, and this is Mind War, Season 5, Episode 2.
Mind War is sponsored by Victory Work Apparel. Use promo code Mind War. Join the Mind War today. Enlist at patreon.com/mindwar. Now back to the show.
Welcome back to Mind War, folks. I appreciate you being here. We have a lot to cover today, so let's get started. Folks, I am very excited to share with you what experiences I had during Wave 5 Tape 2. I can't wait to get there. We're going to talk about that in the second half of today's video, but let's jump right back in where we left off in Dr. Monroe's third book, Ultimate Journey. We left off on Chapter 2, titled The Long, Long Trail. Throughout history, labels have been developed for those who won't leave well enough alone. Infidels, mystics, sinners, rebels, revolutionaries, misfits, neurotics, anarchists, adventurers, traitors, explorers, visionaries, researchers. And I would like to also add mind warriors, citizen samurais, guerrilla gurus, and warrior monks. Add to the list of what you will. Any deviation from the accepted norm engenders risk. All of these individuals have been, for the most part, aware of the risk. If they were not, ignorance was no excuse. If there was a price to be paid in reaction or effect, they must or should have known about it before they took action. No sad tears for the wounded or the dead in such cases. I know this well, and you may discover it for yourself. That's right, folks. We are the misfits of the mind. We are radical revolutionaries in what we're doing here as we explore the gateway. Again, there is no fear here in the Mind War. And we have to understand that we went into this not ignorant of what these tapes were going to do to our lives, how they were going to have fundamental changes to our being, to our belief systems, to who and what we really are. We didn't go into it ignorant. We went into it voluntarily, consciously, and understood the risk we were taking. So it must be said, the different overview, the new thought and belief systems you are beginning to consider can be at most only a belief until you begin to test it for validity within your own ongoing experience during your life as an active human mind. As small beliefs convert to knowns, perhaps larger, different overview beliefs will follow the same path until you are free. So again, as we do this work, as we do the exploration, as we begin to have an experience, and then we go back and test that by trying to have the experience again. Again, that's science, repeating the same test over and over and getting the same conclusion, the same results, right? So as we do that, when you have the experience the first time, it's often, again, very emotional. You're very excited, and it's a belief. You believed that you had that experience. But when you go back and you test it over and over and over again, Now it becomes reality. Now it becomes a truth. Now it becomes science, because you say, I can recreate this over and over again. And as we do that, again, those fundamental changes to our belief systems occur, and that sets us free. So in this chapter, Dr. Monroe connects with a new spirit being, and he calls it, and he has used this term in the last book as well, for these spirit beings, these entities. I like to use those words. I think they're culturally, they are more digestible. But again, Monroe tries to steer clear from those because he's trying to take a very scientific view of this. And so these entities or spirit beings that we might meet along our gateway exploration, he calls them inspect, or intelligent species. So you might see the word inspect, right? And so he talks about how he meets up with this new spirit being because he wants to learn something more. He wants something more fundamental, right? And so they talk about how they're floating outside of the earth. They're looking down at it, and they see multiple layers of kind of energy forms as you go further and further from the earth. There are multiple layers. He talks about that first layer being very chaotic, noisy, loud, confusing. And that first layer, when you kind of look down at the earth, is you see all of human emotions all occurring at one time. And it's all often thought of as noise because it's hard to understand what it is. It's very, again, bright and chaotic, but things calm down as you go each level higher as you leave the earth in your spirit body. So now Monroe is talking with his spirit guide here, and he says this: I don't know, but I'm not afraid. That's true. Right at this moment, I am here talking with you in a rational way. With you, someone who is very familiar to me. A brightly glowing figure that some people would interpret as a god, an angel, or at the very least some extraterrestrial. Yet we are here talking just like two ordinary people, except that we are not using words. The difference is the lack of fear, says the spirit being. Monroe says, there is so much potential. Who are you actually? Or maybe I should say, what are you? Now I do have the courage to ask. And the spirit says, it is beyond your experience to understand at this time, but you will understand very soon. Can we meet again? Monroe asks. All you need to do is ask for help. You mean meditating or saying prayers? The spirit says, no. The words and rituals are meaningless. It is the thought, the emotion, that is the signal. If the proper signal is given, we are able to help. Monroe says, let me be sure of this. You are not the god, a god, or perhaps someone from another planet? And the spirit guide says, no, not from another planet. So again, I want to be very clear here. Monroe is asking, when I want to contact you, when I want to ask you for help, he's asking the spirit being that he just described as either a god, an angel, or an extraterrestrial. He says, should I be meditating or praying in any specific way? And the spirit being says, the words and rituals are meaningless. Sorry for all of you religious folks out there who constantly are remembering and memorizing these incantations that you use to do your magical practices or whatever religion you practice. But it says what's more important is the thought and the emotion that you put into it. And I believe that 100%. You cannot tell me that a true believer in something who is very emotional about it and is having these thoughts and they are, desperate for answers. You can't tell me that that person can't make connection with higher beings just because they're not saying the exact words humana, 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 out of some ritual book that was written thousands of years ago, while you're in some Catholic or some giant Gothic cathedral, right, with wooden pews and all sorts of idols all over the walls. That's not the only way to do it. In fact, those people, by doing it so robotically, they're never going to have contact with these beings, right? Let's see here. It says, I realized that the prime fallacy lay in a simple fact. Whatever I did, whatever I wrote, whatever I said would have little, if any, effect upon human destiny. It was good to be of service to those around me, but this was no more than a passing ego gratification. 2 generations later, it would all be forgotten. Footprints in the sand, washed away by the tides of time. Well, Dr. Monroe, wherever you are, just understand that the work that you've done, maybe we are still in that first or second generation from your work, but it has had profound effects on not only myself, but so many people. Your work is not forgotten. We are carrying it on. And my hope is that by rediscovering the work that you've done and sharing it with others through the Mind War podcast, my hope is that maybe we can push it another generation or two, and we can continue to explore and continue to gather new knowledge, and that this process, this new practice that we're doing here, can be shared with others and enlighten the world. My fear, though, is that we go back to another dark ages where this type of stuff is stifled and forced back into the occult hidden world. Monroe's spirit guide says here, as you remember more, it will become clear to you. You are being human when your fundamental focus remains fixed within such concepts of consciousness. If you change this fundamental, you are no longer human. I see, said Monroe. Thus, I stay being human, awake or asleep, in or out of the body, physically or alive or dead, as long as my reference point is human. That is correct, said the spirit. But I retain all of my human memory and experience in whatever state of being, said Monroe. Yes, you have learned much. This experience is of great value as a non-human. It is one of the basic purposes of your journey. You will draw upon it in many ways when you become non-human. But your attention will be in another direction. The graduates from the human experience are very respected elsewhere. Whatever lay or whatever it comes next, whatever that we're going to experience after we finally leave the physical body for the last time and are not allowed to return, the lessons that we've learned here in the physical life, those lessons and the experiences that we achieve while being humans are respected throughout the universe. The spirits that we are in our physical bodies right now are very special. Of the entire universe, of all the living, intelligent spirit beings that are out there, very few of us have been able to experience what it means to be human. And it's something that you should be proud of. And it's something to carry with you into our next life. Monroe says, does this mean that in what I remember as home, I will no longer be human? The spirit says, you will be as you were before, but the human experience will be added. Monroe says, it comes down to being in the warm and familiar place where I truly belong. The spirit says, your desire is very strong. Yes, it is, said Monroe. You wish to be there again? Asked the spirit. And Monroe says, sometimes I become emotional about it, but I know I haven't completed this cycle yet, so it will come in time. So Monroe is talking about visiting home, what he calls home, the place where we came from before we entered our physical human bodies and the place that we will go back to. And he says he has this strong desire and that it is a place of warmth and familiarity. So that's very comforting to know. It says here, there was a feeling of movement with the wind around me again, the silence, then fading easily into my physical body. I opened my eyes and looked through the tears. Nothing in the moonlight bedroom had changed, but I had. I was unable to get to sleep for several hours, too stimulated, too depressed. Okay. So Dr. Monroe was feeling depressed because his spirit guide took him to this place that he called home. He says that he's visited it twice before in his out-of-body experiences, and he wanted to return. So this was his third time returning to what he considered home, this place of warmth and familiarity. But when he got there this time, he said it was a lot like what we hear as descriptions of heaven. Pillars of beautiful white clouds with all sorts of shapes and colors flowing through them. The sounds of thousands of instruments and thousands of voices singing all in unison. Spirit beings floating through the clouds in games chasing each other. And Monroe said, this is beautiful, this is wonderful, this is exactly the place I remember. I'm so excited to be here. And he stayed there for what he said was either a moment in time or a long time. He couldn't quite tell. But what he realized after that amount of time is that the song was on repeat. The song just kept repeating over and over again. The clouds and the shapes were like in a loop. They just kept moving in the same pattern over and over again. And soon he found that no matter how many times he played the game where he was chasing the other spirit bodies around, it was the same path over and over again. And he got very disheartened. He said, wait a minute, this can't be home. This can't be heaven. This can't be the end. A looped back place where we're doing the same thing over and over again. No creativity, no free will. We're just kind of stuck in this place. And he said, yeah, it feels wonderful. It's warm. It's comforting. I feel happy here. But it's very, there's a lack of stimulation. There's a lack of purpose and intelligence. It became very boring. And so he said he traveled through this place. He went deeper and deeper, high as he could, low as he could, in every place that he went in this kind of, what again sounds like he's describing what people talk about as heaven, this place in the clouds, right? Where you hear the music and you're feeling warmth and you're familiar with this place. He said he got very disheartened. And he became very depressed about the idea that this isn't what he wanted for afterlife. Because one of the beauties of being human, one of the purposes of our lives here is curiosity and growth and continued stimulation. We're going to learn to the very last moment of our lives. That's what this is all about. And the idea that we go to some place for eternity where there is no more learning and there is no more purpose and drive, that sounds boring and kind of scary. So I think that's what Dr. Monroe was talking about when he woke up with a tear in his eye and was feeling a little sad about what he thought of as home. Okay, chapter 3 of Ultimate Journey is titled Along the Interstate. It took me many weeks to adjust to the idea that I would no longer be able to go home. I had thought I would be returning to a hero's welcome, bringing back valuable information from here, the present human life, to change and improve there, this place that we may have thought of as heaven. But it was not to be. I made no attempt to try to go home again. I recognized, finally and sadly, that this option no longer existed for me. It became much on the order of a childhood recollection, something to hold dear as it was, but not to relive. Clearly, much ego and ego gratification were involved. But one known did emerge. I knew why I had left. A further visit with my new spirit friend helped me greatly. He or she or both was waiting, a familiar bright spot in endless blackness. So now he's having an out-of-body experience, visiting his new spirit friend. And the spirit says, the sense of loss will pass. It is not lost because you remember. I don't belong here now. Or I don't belong there now, this place of home. Everything was the same, just as it was, but it didn't fit. It was as if I tried to put on a coat or glove I had outgrown. I can't go there and I'm too different, Monroe said. And that saddened you, asked the spirit? Yes, more than that. It is as if part of me no longer exists. I thought of it so many times, this idea of going home. It is the reality of returning that does not exist. You need to realize the illusion that you could do so, said the spirit guide. Monroe says, I have, and I think I know what the actual difference was. It was exactly as I had remembered it. Nothing had changed. I guess I expected some kind of progress, but what made me face it was the repetition. If you watched long enough, if you listened long enough, everything repeated itself. There's no excitement, nothing new. The spirit said, that energy pattern, you did not learn that from being human. No, said Monroe, that is why I left this place called home. The limiting factor of repetition. There was no growth, nothing new to learn or experience. You learn all the time in living on earth. Change and new learning going on constantly. But the fact that I can't go back home will take getting used to. It is not easy to handle. The spirit guide said, yet you will adjust, just as you will learn when you reach a point where you recognize that you can no longer return to being human. Perhaps it is better put that you not only cannot, but you do not need to do so when you have outgrown what you call the human coat and gloves. So the spirit guide is saying that just like, he felt kind of upset that he wasn't going to return to this place of home, this idea of heaven maybe, the spirit guide said, just like over time, you will lose that connection to this place and you'll no longer be sad about not going back to it. And that happens when you start to forget and move away from this idea of needing to be human. So as a spirit, over time, we will kind of mourn the loss of our human body, it sounds like, but over time we will heal from that and understand we have left that cocoon, we have left that shell of the human physical body, and we have become something new. Monroe says, that will happen? That I won't want to be human? How will I cope with that? The spirit says, when that point approaches, it will be easier than you can perceive as you are now. Well, if you say so, I believe it to be so. You will now understand of merely believing, as you are fond of saying. And Monroe says, thank you for your help, which is a weak way to put it. And his friend says, we understand. You are welcome. So it says here, the glowing figure began to fade and then winked out. My return to the physical was without incident. Things for me changed greatly after this meeting. I became aware of another, wider goal, to grow and evolve somehow into the awe-inspiring yet warm being that I happily called my spirit guide. With this desire and decision, I accepted the gentle encouragement that was being offered. The result was a strange mixture of peace and excitement, simple and complex at the same time, a form of knowing and belonging beyond description. What Monroe is saying here is that he wants to evolve into one of these spirit beings, into one of these higher intelligences. And one of the things that it takes is this idea of mourning the loss of our physical body, mourning the loss of possibly spending eternity in some type of heaven, and understanding that there is still work to do and that we are, we're going to be doing bigger and better things, okay? So through the rest of this chapter, again, very strange, another very esoteric book. So here's what Monroe does, okay? And again, it's very strange. It's not, not something to read through. You're seeing me go through all these these pages here. But basically, here's what happens, okay? So Monroe says to his spirit guide, I would like to go visit other intelligent beings in the planet or in the universe. Some type of intelligent beings that are maybe closely related to humans, something that I can relate to. And the spirit guide said, perfect, I know exactly where to go. And so they went back in time to the earth millions of years ago into what almost sounds like a description of the Garden of Eden. Again, we've kind of had this idea play out before. But Monroe says they float down into this valley. There's hills on each side, snow-capped mountains. The valley is filled with trees, and it goes out into this lush fields that go all the way out into the horizon. And the spirit being said, there are 2 million people down there. And he said, that's all the people that are on the planet today. And so Monroe got very upset and he said, well, wait a minute, there was billions of people on the planet. What happened? How did it get down to 2 million? And he said, no, you're thinking of it wrong. This is the start. We're back at the beginning of humanity, of mankind. And Monroe said, okay. So they go down to visit the people, and Monroe was kind of expecting to run into cavemen, right? But instead, he found these extremely intuitive human beings that were communicating through ESP, that were able to communicate with the animals around them. In some ways, it was like when we think of Native Americans, we often hear how connected to the earth and to wildlife that they were, right? That they would know when to move and to travel because of the time of the year, or they were watching animals as they would hibernate or move throughout their area, right? They were very in tune with earth and with themselves and with their bodies, very, very different than the kind of disconnected materialistic world that we live in today. So Monroe was very excited to meet these people. He learned what he could from them, and they said, we've been here for thousands of years, growing to this number of 2 million that we are today. And he says these beings, these human beings of the past, again, with their intuitive nature, they said, we received a signal that it was time to leave the valley. And we've sent explorers out into the world. And now we are starting to follow them. And basically the rest of the world was outside of this kind of Garden of Eden, right? It was where there is death and destruction and all of the things that we deal with in the world today. So it was kind of this, extended version of what the Garden of Eden story sounded like, right? Very interesting. And Monroe said, okay, now can we visit someone else that are further away from the human experience? Can we visit some type of entity that I might not have any type of real conscious connection with, that I don't really understand, right? And so the spirit guide took his hand and they traveled throughout the universe. And Monroe said, we ended up going through this very bright white light. and the white light turned yellow, and then it turned orange, and we were enveloped by the orange color. It was like we could feel it all around us. It was everywhere that we looked. It was in, just pushing upon us, this orange color. It enveloped us. And he said, when we got into this state of being, into this place, he heard all these tones and this vibration, these beats, kind of beating down upon him in almost a Morse code. And he realized, okay, we're communicating with whatever this spirit is. And basically, what he learned is that he was communicating with the spirit of a star or a sun, right? He was communicating with the sun. And they basically were talking about how they really don't have much in common, right? The sun doesn't understand what it means to be a human, and humans don't understand what it means to be a spirit sun. But the spirit guide, Monroe's spirit guide, said, listen, the reason I wanted to introduce you to the sun or this star is because this is an example of life, of God, of really the creator, right? And if you think about it, here on earth, the sun is our creator in so many ways. Because if the sun doesn't rise tomorrow, we all disappear. We won't last 24 hours. The sun is our life. Without it, there is only death on the planet. And so I thought that was very interesting, right? That, we look back throughout history and we see this kind of sun worship. And now I'm not saying that we should be worshiping the sun as a god, but I really think that, giving thanks to our physical world, giving thanks to the warmth that we receive from the sun, giving thanks to the water that we receive from the clouds, the darkness that comes upon us every night that allows us to rest. I know this might sound a little hippy-dippy, whatever. I think those things are important. Again, we don't have to worship them as gods, but I think it's important to appreciate them for what they truly are. This life-giving, physical things that are out there for us, right? So, again, a very strange chapter. That was chapter 3, Along the Interstate. Again, another kind of esoteric book. We're going to work through it. We're going to try to decipher what Dr. Monroe is telling us and see how we can apply that to our lives and see exactly, what he's trying to get at with this book. What is he really trying to tell us, right? So that was chapters, 2 and 3 from the book Ultimate Journey by Dr. Robert Monroe, the third book in his 3-book trilogy. And folks, we are going to do a deep dive into Wave 5, Exploring, Tape 2, Discovering Intuition, after a word from our sponsor.
Mind War is sponsored by Victory Work Apparel. Use promo code Mind War.
Welcome back, folks. Let's do our deep dive into Wave 5, Exploring, Tape 2, Discovering Intuition. Folks, I have not been this excited to share with you the experience I've had with these tapes. There's been very few tapes where something like this has occurred, and it really took me back. So in this tape, we go into Focus 12, and in this expanded state of awareness, we are going to perceive beyond our 5 physical senses, and we are going to remember a time when, without any external physical cues, we knew something to be true. Perhaps you call it a hunch or a gut feeling. And perhaps you changed a course of action because of this knowing. Remember a time when you just knew something to be true. Recreate that memory of that situation in your mind. Remember it vividly with as much detail as you can. Now, remember the feelings being associated with that intuitive knowing. Remember the feeling and allow yourself to experience that feeling or feelings once again. Feel it clearly and strongly. Do it now. Okay. So we are instructed to go back and remember a time in our life where we had an intuitive feeling, where we had a hunch, a gut feeling, and we acted on that gut feeling and changed our course, and we did something different simply because of the hunch, simply because of that thought. Okay. So the story that I'm going to tell about the time in the past where I had an intuitive thought, I had a hunch. I've talked about this before in my series, My Magical Year. You can find it on YouTube, the playlist, again, My Magical Year. You can go back and listen to those. That's some of my earliest work. I talked about this a little bit. But here's what happened. So one night, about a year and a half ago, maybe now, it's difficult to try to pin all this down, right? But I went to bed early one night. I was still working at the library at this time, and I thought, I need to try to get to bed early so I'm not so exhausted at work every day. So I turned off the television, closed the Mind War Estates up, and Leo and I headed for bed, and it was around 10 o'clock. Now, this was much earlier. I usually stay up until at least 2 o'clock every night. So this was much earlier than I normally do. So we laid down, and I, looked at my phone for a little bit, and I set it down, turned on a podcast, and tried to fall asleep. But I could not sleep. I was tossing and turning for at least an hour. And it wasn't because I was just tired, okay? I had this deep, very strange feeling welling up. It was not just from inside here, but it was more in my mind. It was this thing in my mind where I was like, I have to do this. And what I needed to do was draw something. Draw it. Take a pencil, take a pen, and draw something on paper. It was such a weird feeling of this need to draw something. It was so strong that it got me out of bed. I literally turned the lights back on. I went out in the living room. Leo came and joined me, my little Boston Terrier, my best buddy. He was sitting there next to me all curled up. I got the TV tray out. I grabbed a snack, and I grabbed a few pieces of paper and an ink pen. And I turned on YouTube, and I just started drawing. And I sat there and I just made a few doodles, right? Just drew a few things and didn't really think much of it. They were very simple designs. And I was like, what was that? Why did I need to get these drawings out so badly? Okay. So on the screen here, I'm going to show you what I drew. You should be seeing that now. And what you're going to see here is some very simple drawings of some kind of pillars, right? It looks like different pillars or columns, and they lead on a pathway. And that pathway is leading off into the distance in a perspective view up into what looks like a black sun, right? A very simple drawing. There wasn't much to it, but again, there was just this intuitive need to draw this picture. I had to do it. I had to get it out. And folks, as soon as I did, I just relaxed. That need, that desire, that gut feeling went away. I turned off the television, turned the lights off. Leo and I went back to bed, and I fell fast asleep. Okay. Now, You might say, well, Victor, I mean, that's cool, but what is it? What does that mean? You just drew these little pictures. That's cool. Where does the intuition part come in? Here's what happened. The very next day when I got home from work, I turned on YouTube and I saw a video about the Chicago World's Fair back in the 1930s. So back in the early, 1900s, they would have these World's Fairs. I mean, I think they went on even earlier than that, where one city every year would be kind of chosen to have the World's Fair. They would set it up with all these booths and kind of entertainment, and they would show new technologies and celebrate cultures, and people from around the world would come to the World's Fair. And so in this one, this happened to be, I believe, in 1933. And at this Chicago World's Fair, each day they were celebrating a different culture. So one day might be Italian culture or Irish culture or English culture, right? Each year or each day was a different culture was celebrated. And they would put on a big event for them, have parades, things like that. So while I was watching this video, they talked about the day where the Jewish culture was being celebrated. And so in their pageantry, what they did is they had a stadium there, and all of the Jewish people who were celebrating that day, they got dressed up in these kind of ancient clothes, right? Kind of the cloaks. And there was thousands of them participating in almost like a play, okay? And so in the middle of the football field, you see all these people around and they're kind of dancing and singing. And in the middle of the field, there is a giant golden calf, right? This giant golden statue of a calf or a cow, right? Or really more of a bull, to be honest. And this bull had smoke coming out of it and flames coming out of it. You can see this video. This is all real. It's a black and white video. You can see this actually happening, okay? And so this giant bull had kind of like a ramp or stairs leading up to it, and the belly of the bull was open, and you could see the fire and flames coming out of it. And so a man, literally dressed as a wizard, folks, the long pointed top hat with the big brim, the big white beard, the long cloak, literally, I think it had like stars on the cloak. He's walking up this ramp holding a child, okay? Now again, this was all a play. This wasn't happening for real, but it was a reenactment. And as he walked up to this golden calf, he placed the child inside of it. This representation of into, I believe it is Baal, the god known as Baal, right? It was very interesting. It was a very strange video to watch. And I was like, okay, this is kind of weird, right? Now here's what happened. They showed a picture of the pamphlet for this pageant. It was called, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of it. You'll see it on the screen here. It was A Passion of the People, something like that. And it was a pamphlet that was handed out to people to say, come celebrate the Jewish Heritage Day, right? That pamphlet looked exactly like the drawing that I so desperately needed to draw the night before. Okay, you're seeing that on the screen right now. The comparison between this pamphlet and the picture I so desperately needed to draw the night before. That was the intuitive gut feeling that as the tape was telling us to go back and review, that's what I did. So while listening to Wave 5 Exploring, Tape 2, Discovering Intuition, when the announcer says, go back and remember and time when you had a gut feeling or an intuitive feeling, this is the thing that I went back and remembered. Clear as day, folks. 4K, crystal clear in my mind. I remember myself going to bed early, tossing and turning, having that feeling of waking up, going and sitting back down. I was watching it all happen. But here's what happened next. While this was occurring, I entered my own body from the past and drew the picture for me. Okay? So what does this mean? Okay? What does this mean to have this out-of-body experience, literally go back in time and view this intuitive event that occurred in my life, and then to enter my own body and draw the picture, do the thing that needed to be done. Okay. Think about deja vu. We've talked about it before. Deja vu is when, in my opinion, it is when in the past you have dreamt about the future. And then in the future, or what is the present, when you live through that future, you remember the dream you had. You say, oh my gosh, I've already lived through this. Okay. Here's what I think happens. Deja vu is when we fall asleep unconsciously. Our spirit body leaves our body, like all cultures say throughout time, that when people fall asleep, we have out-of-body experiences. We're just unconscious to it and we don't remember. I think what deja vu is that we go into the past and we insert these memories of the future into our past dreams. Okay? We kind of warn our past selves about what is coming. Because again, I think that we can interact with the past, but I do not think that we can interact with the future. It's only a way of kind of warning us from the future in a way, right? So what I realized last night is that all the deja vu that I've had in the past as a younger man and as a kid having these dreams of the future and then living through them and saying, I've done this before. All of those happened unconsciously through sleep. But what I believe that I rediscovered last night is that we can do this consciously. And what we do through this tape, by listening to this tape and thinking about those times that we had intuitive events in our lives, those gut feelings, we consciously go back and put that future thought in our own minds. I hope I'm explaining this properly because it is revolutionary. This goes beyond anything that I've ever heard about with this subject. Because I think what we can do now with this knowledge is that we can consciously go back and feed information from our present. We can feed information to us in the past. Okay? I think that we can go back and warn ourselves about what is coming. Okay? And the reason that we want to do this is because it's going to build our intuition. It's going to make us stronger. So now, current present time. Okay, so as of this recording, it is September 18th, 2024. Last night was a lunar eclipse, a partial lunar eclipse, a full moon. Last night is when I listened to these tapes and had this understanding. And I then went on to have just amazing revelations in my spiritual work too. For as much as this story may be shocking to you, what I'm trying to explain to you, what I learned in my spirit work that we're going to share in future seasons, that was just as shocking. I mean, last night was so intense. It was amazing. And so, again, I think what we do is now, as the present being, as of today, right now, I need to really focus on that intuition. When I feel that gut feeling, when I think something, is right or wrong, whatever the intuition is, I can now say to myself, this may be a message from me in the future. Okay. Again, we're not controlling the future. We're simply receiving information from ourselves because, again, I think we can work with the past. And I think that's what we do with this. I mean, it truly blew me away. And this is something that I'm going to continue to practice. And I hope that I'm explaining this properly. I hope you all understand what I'm trying to say here. Is that through Wave 5, Tape 2, Discovering Intuition, we're going to go back and review those intuitive gut feelings that we've had in the past. We're going to relive them, and we're going to enter our bodies and provide that information to our past selves. And when we do that purposely and consciously today, we know that in the future, as we go forward, when we have these intuitive thoughts, that it's coming from us. That's the most important. That's one of the themes of the Gateway program, of the Mind War, is the answers are inside of us. The information is coming from us. We might look to the universe. We might look outwardly for these answers, but they're in here. And these gut feelings that we get, this intuition, this is us warning ourselves from the future. Hey, this is what's coming. This is not what I expected. This is not something I went into this tape thinking, oh, this is what's going to happen. This is not a belief system that I've had. I've never heard anyone explain intuition and deja vu this way, especially that we can control it possibly. But I tell you what, folks, every time that I have a gut feeling or act on my intuition from now on, I'm going to go back and listen to this tape very quickly after it, and I'm going to relive it. And I'm going to go back and tell myself, here is what you did. Here is what you experienced. Here's what's happening. It's so crazy to think about that drawing and say, here's what you're going to see. This is what you're going to end up seeing tomorrow. I went back to that me of the past, that version of me in the past, and said, draw this picture because tomorrow you're going to see it. Fuck, man. It was really wild. It was so intense having that event occur, having the need to draw that picture and then getting out of bed and actually doing it. And then the next day seeing it on my television screen. And folks, again, if you go back to my Magical Year, that playlist, and watch those videos, or if you carry on with me as we get into the spiritual side and into the 12 tribes, all of the different things that we're going to cover in the future, this story, this is the beginning event that has led us to where we are today. This is just the beginning. The things that have spawned from that picture are just as shocking, if not more. But that feeling was so intense. To have that gut feeling to draw the picture and then doing it and the next day seeing it, that was so intense. But telling you folks, last night when I had this revelation while listening to the tapes, when I went back and saw myself on the couch, and I went into my own body and drew that picture for me, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. I don't know what this means. I'm going to continue working with this intuition, discovering intuition this way. I mean, this is far beyond anything that I ever thought we were going to discover in the Gateway program. I don't know how it's going to affect the rest of my life, but I'm telling you, it's something to explore and research, and I am so excited for it. And I hope I've explained it properly. I hope you folks understand what I'm talking about here. So that was amazing. That was a huge part of this tape. The instructor goes on to have you do it again with a second event of intuition. The next one, I was kind of so excited about what just happened. I wasn't able to kind of grasp anything. But it was so intense, okay, folks? So I am so excited to share that information with you, and I can't wait to see what comes from it. Now, I do want to address one more thing before we finish, and that is, again, in the last episode, I talked about how in the new tapes, the instructor, they say, it's time to wake up using the number 1, but when they do it, there's about 3 minutes of tape left. So here's what I did this time. When they said, wake up, do it now, instead of just tearing off the eye covers and getting out of bed like I normally do, I stayed with it. And I allowed myself to continue listening, because the next 3 minutes you hear the spaceship coming back down to Earth, right? You hear yourself landing the airplane. You come out of focus 12 and come back into your body, right? When I did this last night and followed through and stayed with my eyes closed and didn't move yet, the weight of my spirit body coming back into my physical body, it took the breath out of me. I literally didn't breathe for about a minute, and it pushed me into the bed. I could physically feel my body being pushed down into the bed. It was so intense. I've never felt a return to the physical body like this. Just this pressure of coming back down. It was wild. It felt amazing. It was so different than any of the other kind of returns. One of the things that I found is it's returning to the body where you get the most profound experience, because what you realize is, holy shit, where was I? Now that I'm back in my physical body, where was I for the last 30 minutes? What state of being was I really in? Because I know I'm in my physical body now, but the last 30 minutes, I was doing something way different, right? So after that pressure, returning back to the physical body, then the alarm started to go off, just like at the end of all the other tapes. That's when I removed the eye cover and turned the lights on and got up right away and started taking my notes here, right? So again, in wave 5, as we go through, at least with tapes 1 and 2, when they say wake up, allow yourself to wait until you hear the alarm to kind of get out and actually wake up and get moving, all right? So folks, what a wild episode. I mean, wave 5 exploring, tape 2 discovering intuition, far beyond any thoughts that I had about what this tape would be. Really blew my mind. This idea of us consciously planting these memories in our past selves is just amazing. I can't wait to explore it further. I'm so appreciative of you being here. And as always, folks, remember, harden your hearts and open your minds, because this is Mind War.